Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Level Up English podcast, the best place to come to learn the English language, practice the British accent, and hopefully have fun as well with me, your host, Michael Lavers. Today, we are talking about the 80-20 rule. This is something that I've been thinking about a bit recently, and as I've been planning this episode, I've been seeing examples of this everywhere. It's really fascinating, and maybe you know about it already, and maybe you've seen examples of it in the real world, or it may be a new concept for you. And maybe we'll also look today at how you can use this principle, this concept, to improve your life as well. I'm sure you can. I should just say, though, I have barely recovered from a very long illness. I feel like I may have had COVID. I didn't do any tests, so I don't know, but it feels similar. I think I first started to feel weak about 12 days ago, and then I had 11 days of sore throat, sniffy nose, headaches, feeling very weak. My muscles felt very weak. I don't think I had a fever, however, but I didn't feel good. And if I were to record this episode yesterday, you would tell my voice would be very deep. However, today, I think it's a bit better. But hopefully I can keep going for the whole length of this episode without coughing. Let's see how I do. But if you are watching on YouTube, you might see that my eyes are even more red, even redder than normal, which I don't know if it's obvious, but I may look a bit tired and worn out, and that's because this illness has taken its toll on me. That's a good phrase to start with. I didn't plan on sharing that phrase, but let's talk about that. Taken its toll on me. That means it has a negative effect on someone over some time. So the stress of her work took its toll on her life. So it's causing some negative effect. The illness has taken its toll on me, and I am exhausted. But having said that, I'm happy to be back. I also went on a short trip to Singapore. It was my first time there. I had an amazing time. Singapore is a beautiful place, and I hope to go back soon. However, it's a bit more expensive than I'm used to here in Bangkok. But if you've been to Singapore, let me know, and let me know if you had a good time there too, because I thought it was amazing. If you ever get the chance, I highly recommend it. Don't forget as well that you can sign up to Level Up English members to get bonus content for each episode that I make here as well. So if you want to learn with the transcripts or get bonus quizzes and vocabulary lists and many, many more courses and lessons, I'm literally adding to this not literally, but almost every day. Almost every day, there's something being changed or updated. And usually once a week, there is a new lesson to learn or to take, in addition to the podcast episodes as well. So there's a lot going on over there. So if you're interested in leveling up your English even more and also supporting me to help this podcast continue, then you can become a member at levelupenglish.school. And then there's a members button at the top of the page, which I have made big and glowy so everyone can see it. But yeah, hopefully that is useful to some of you. And to those of you who already support and are members already, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. But okay, let's get into the main topic today, which, as I said before, is the 80-20 rule. Another name for this is the Pareto Principle. I think that's how you pronounce his name. Pareto. It sounds, I normally hear it in the American accent when I listen on other podcasts. So in my accent, it sounds a bit weird, I guess. But Pareto was an Italian sociologist and economist. And he realized that in Italy at the time, about 80% of the income was in the hands of about 20% of the population. I imagine this difference is much worse around the world now. But in essence, in short, a small percent of the people had a large majority of the wealth. And he noticed that. And he expanded this idea, he expanded this to cover other things as well. And he made a rule that became known as the Pareto 80-20 rule. And basically what that means is 80% of results are made by 20% of causes. Right? So the minority of something makes the majority of something. And there are so many examples where this comes up in society, in the world, and in your personal life as well. Here's some examples that I found online, which I found very interesting. 20% of criminals commit 80% of crimes. Commit just means do. When we're talking about a crime, we use the verb commit. 20% of drivers cause 80% of traffic accidents. So there's a lot of accidents on the road, but if we only removed 20% of those drivers around the world, the accidents would be reduced by a huge amount. Well, by 80%, right? So that's a huge one to know. 80% of pollution comes from 20% of factories. So again, if we eliminate those 20 factories, those 20% factories, will improve pollution by a lot. This one is huge, and I'm sure you're going to be thinking about this in your own life as well. 20% of employees, of workers, are responsible for 80% of the results. Right? So 20% of the employees are responsible for 80% of the results. When you think about your workplace, if you have a job, are you in the 20% or are you in the other 80%? So think about all of the outcomes, the work that gets done at your job. I imagine you can kind of agree that, yeah, most of the work gets done by a small number of people. A large number of people at my job, for example, don't do much work. Maybe their work adds up to like 20% of the total effort. So that's really interesting. So I guess if you want to be a really, really good employee and get promoted easily, just be in that top 20%. That's a hard one though, isn't it? And here's one I added to the list because I've recently come back from a trip, as I said, and I noticed something interesting on the plane. This was, it's just a guess. I think a lot of what we're talking about today is not accurate. It's not going to be exactly 80%. It's just a rough idea, right? That exact number is not too important. But what it seemed to me is on the plane, 80% of the airline staff's time was spent on 20% of the customers. Most customers were not doing anything. They were just quiet. They were easy. They knew what to do. But there's always a few, 20% of customers that are difficult, right? And it could be, I don't know, they're drunk and they need lots of attention because they're being annoying, they're being a nuisance to everyone else. It could be an innocent problem, like they just don't know what to do because they haven't been on a plane before. Little things like that take up a lot of the staff members' time. There was one man when I got on the plane who was in the wrong seat, so there was a big queue behind him. The flight attendant, which is the person who works on the plane, the flight attendant had to tell them, oh, this is not your seat is over there. So the man stood up after some confusion, and then he went over and sat in another wrong seat, and then he had to sit in different seats until he finally got the correct seat. And I'm not sure what the problem was, if he didn't understand English or if he just didn't know how planes worked. But that took a lot of time, and it made me think of this concept with customers as well. So that's interesting. So there's a few ways, I think, in which you can use this rule to improve your life. So think about ways in your life where 20% of your effort can account for 80% of the outcomes. This is a good word that we might use a little bit today. Account for. To account for something. This is used a lot in numbers. It's got that word count inside, and it means when something adds up to a total. So we could say, for example, apples account for 50% of my diet, which is not true. That's not a healthy diet. But that means apples equal 50% of my diet. It accounts for 50%. Okay, so let's use this Pareto principle and think about learning a language. That's why we're all here, isn't it? So when you're learning English, for example, think about ways where a small amount of effort can make 80% of the outcome. When I think about my own language learning routines, I imagine this is true. And I imagine speaking practice makes up about 20% of my study, right? I don't spend too much time speaking. However, speaking is such a useful skill to learn, and you're learning so much when you're speaking that maybe that 20% of speaking accounts for 80% of my progress, right? And then we'll get to this more later as well, but the opposite might also be true. I probably spend 80% of my time studying in flashcards. It's not quite vocabulary, but flashcard sentences where I'm learning words in a sentence. I really enjoy it. I do like doing this. But to be honest, that 80% of time probably accounts for 20% of my progress. So here we can think about what can we do to make our language learning more efficient. If I wanted to be more efficient in this case, I probably would increase my speaking. I don't have to speak 10 hours a day, but just a little bit more of speaking and maybe a little bit less of those flashcards. And that might make me improve faster. So here's a question for you. What is the 20% of your learning that would help you improve the most? Think about that. A really tangible, which means easy to understand, example of this rule is with businesses, with being an entrepreneur, a business owner, because many things that businesses do or companies do to make money doesn't work so well. You know, a lot of companies have to try many, many different things to make some money. And I think what usually happens is 20% of the products or services that a company has makes 80% of the profit of their income. I think this might be true for me. If I think about it in terms of time, 20% of my time is spent on the stuff that makes 80% of my income. I think it might be true. I mean, it's a little bit hard to say because my income's a bit different. It doesn't work quite the same as some other jobs. So for example, I do spend a lot of time making lessons for Level Up English for the members. However, compared to the podcast, they don't get so many views. Of course, the podcast is public and it has many, many more downloads and views than the private lessons. But I guess it's really hard to say how much time I spend doing each one, and it's kind of hard to link them to an income, to a cost. So it's a little bit difficult for me, but I suppose it's possible. But there's a few things that are really good to talk about here. If you have your own business or you're dreaming of it, you're thinking of it, you want to start one in the future. And this is something that I'm telling a friend at the moment because I know someone who is in the early days of starting a business. And I think what's really common is we mistakenly believe that the more time we spend on something, the more valuable it should be, or the more successful you will be. And this just isn't true. I think we have this idea in traditional work that if we spend more time on something, our boss or bosses will be happier about that. But when it comes to your own business, sometimes less is more. And this is because success is not equal to effort, which sounds really unfair, but you can work really, really hard and not see success, or you can do something really simple and see a lot of success. It kind of depends on different factors. Luck is a huge factor, let's be honest. Luck comes into this a lot. But also other things too, like you don't have to work hard to provide value for people. Like, for example, I can make the most amazing video with beautiful editing, really high quality cameras, and I'm talking about my day. I'm walking around, filming myself, showing, oh, this is the food I've got, this is the shop that I go to. It's all about me, right? And even though I've put so much work into that video, I would guess it wouldn't be so popular because I'm not providing any value. I'm not helping anyone. However, conversely, the opposite way, if I make a very low budget video, I use my phone camera, not a great microphone, but I am telling people how to learn a language, how to do it really easily and save your time, for example, I'm hopefully giving a lot of value, and people will enjoy watching that more, not because of how much time I spent doing it, just because of how much it will benefit them. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I explained that well enough. So the idea really is to think about how you can free up your time. It's a phrasal verb there, to free up, means make yourself more free and become more efficient. So focus on that 20%, right? Especially if you've got another job and you're doing a side business, right? You only need 20% of effort to make 80% of the outcome. So what could that 20% be for you? Another really common pattern in business is 20% of customers bringing 80% of the income. So of course, if you do own a business or you do have customers, focus on that 20%. They are your core people, your special people. The other customers are, of course, important, the other 80% of customers. However, they only account for 20% of your income. So you could lose 80% and you'll be fine. You just need that 20% portion of customers to keep your business going. So I guess in one way that's quite nice that you can have a business with so few customers. But on the other hand, it's a bit scary because if just one or two people start leaving, then your business is in big trouble, right? So maybe it's important to have a balance of that 20% and the 80% as well in this case. I do see this a lot. I do watch some Twitch streamers, like video games and stuff online. And whenever I see a donation come up on the screen, people are giving the streamers some money, it's often the same people every time. It's always the same people. So it seems to me like most people are watching and not donating. And there's a very small 20% of people who donate regularly. So it seems like this is true in my experience. Another example in which you can use this to improve your life is thinking about the activities that you do. Because it may be true that 20% of your life is spent doing the things that bring you 80% of your happiness. So think about your day or your week. How much time are you spending doing things that make you happy? A lot of your time, maybe 80%, is going to work, sitting in the car, on the train, waiting for something to happen, something like that. Something not so exciting. It's not really making you happy. But there are other things that you do, maybe on the weekend, in the evening, meeting friends, going for a walk, this kind of stuff, where that is what really makes you happy, and it gives you good memories as well. So I think this is true for me. A lot of my time, I enjoy making the podcast. I enjoy even cleaning the flat. I enjoy most of my life, but that doesn't mean it's all making me happy. I don't dislike doing my emails, but it also doesn't make me happy to do my emails, usually, right? Unless I get a very nice one. So email me, make me happy if you want to. You can send me a nice email. Maybe 20% of my week is spent meeting friends and doing things outside, trying new things, new experiences, and this makes about 80% of my total happiness. Again, it's a rough number, but I think that's true. So how can we focus on doing more of these things? How can we focus on having a really fulfilling, exciting life and expanding that 20% into other areas? Right, that could be a nice thing to do. It could be something like doing more walks throughout the day if you have that opportunity, Or even just thinking about what makes you happy, think about what is in that 20%, and that might just be enough to put more energy into those things, right? If you realize your friends are really adding happiness to your life, then maybe you want to give them a call or contact them if you haven't done in a while. Another one that I enjoy is, another example is 20% of your apps and your programs that you use make up 80% of what you use. So in other words, most of the things you have, like let's say the apps on your phone, you rarely use them. And it's true for me. I really like the idea of digital minimalism, which is trying to be simple in the digital world. If you look at my desktop right now on my laptop, it's very empty. I've got a couple podcast things here that I need to edit, but there's really not much there. And I try to be as simple as possible. If I don't use an app very much, I will delete it. I don't like too many apps on my phone. However, even for me, I think it's definitely true that I probably only use 20% of the apps on a daily or even weekly basis. And most of my apps I only use at specific times, like when I'm flying or on a train or something like that. So, I don't know, maybe you don't really care. But if you are the kind of person who likes simplicity and you feel calmer with a simple life, maybe you could have a think about what are these 80% of apps that you almost never use, that you don't use them very much. And maybe you could consider deleting them. There are some apps that I don't have on my phone, such as Instagram, but when I want to use it or post something, I download it, post something, and then delete it again, which seems really inconvenient, but it really does help with social media addiction. It's really hard to get addicted to an app when you have to download it every time. So that's a good tip if you want some help with that. We spoke about digital minimalism, but also it can work for real life minimalism as well. Clothing is a good example. I am also very minimal with my clothes. If you're very observant, you may have noticed on my videos that I don't wear a big variety of clothes. However, there's probably about 20% of your clothes that make up or account for 80% of what you wear, right? And if you open your wardrobe right now, have a look at how many clothes you wear maybe on a daily basis and how many you haven't worn for quite some time, right? And you might consider finding that 80% and selling them or donating them or something like that and seeing if that makes any difference to how you feel. Personally, when I open my wardrobe and I see like simplicity and not empty, but not chaotic, not busy, I love that feeling. It makes me feel so good that everything's tidy. I enjoy all the clothes I have. I don't have clothes that I ignore or neglect. But I know for some people it doesn't really matter. So if you don't really care about that, again, we can move on. Maybe it's not a big deal for some of you. I think I'll do one more here because this one is also relevant to our daily lives and I like this one. And this is 20% of cleaning makes 80% of the visible difference. Right, so this is super useful. I think we can have two categories here, like tidying, which is moving your items around, and cleaning, which is more like using chemicals or removing dirt from your living space. So I think they're both true, though. I think it's a bit of a problem that I have. I tend to do a deep clean a few times a month. I used to do it every week, and sometimes that becomes hard, like spending a few hours every week cleaning in one go. It's not always possible to find the time to do that. So when I'm busy, I put it off. If you put something off, that means you do it later. I'll put it off. I'll do it later. I don't want to do it now. I'll delay doing it. So when I'm busy, I put it off. And I realized recently that it's much better if I can identify that 20% that really makes a difference and focus on that a couple times a week. So I think in terms of cleaning, that would be the toilet, the sink or the sinks, and maybe the floors as well, and the surfaces. I think that would be about, maybe that's a bit more than 20, but I don't think it takes long. So cleaning the surfaces, like the table, the kitchen surface, that doesn't take, do it every day, ideally, and it will take, 1 minute, 2 minutes, not very long. Clean the sinks before you go to bed, it takes 2 minutes, just spray the sink and wipe it down. Clean the toilet a couple times a week, 5 minutes, it's not much. That could be about 20%, and it really makes a big difference on how clean your environment looks. If you have a clean sink, your kitchen will feel much cleaner, right? So that is that 20%. And maybe that little stuff like cleaning inside your cupboards, inside and behind your fridge, under the sofa, maybe cleaning the sofa itself, all that kind of little stuff, cleaning the windows. It's important, but maybe doesn't have to be something you do all the time, like every week maybe. So it's just something I've been thinking about. What is that 20% that really makes a big difference? And I guess it depends on where you live and your room as well. I think for me also the floor would be included, because it doesn't take too long for me to clean the floor, but dirt really shows up easily on the floor that I have. So yeah, I don't know if there's much else to say on that one. It's a weird topic, I suppose, but something that I was considering. So I think to end this episode, I'm going to give you a few questions to think about on improving your life and simplifying your life. The first ones here, I guess you can also use to think about language learning if you prefer to use these to improve your English as well. So question number 1 is, what are the 20% of activities that you do that make 80% of the results? So if you really want to get into this topic, get out a piece of paper and a pen, pen and a piece of paper, write the answers down to these questions. And also think about, here's another question, are you focusing on the less important areas and ignoring the most important skills? In other words, are you spending your day just being busy, but you're not actually focused on the things that make a difference in your life? So then think about what activity you can do that brings you the most results. Also think about what activities you're currently doing in your routine that bring you the least amount of results. Things that you're spending 80% of your time on, but they're only giving you 20% of the outcome. And maybe consider reducing these to save your time. So think about how you can use that for language learning and also in your life in general. And when it comes to making your life more simple, here are some questions that you can consider. What are the 20% of your possessions that give you the most value? What do you spend 20% of your time doing that gives you 80% of your happiness? Who are the 20% of people that account for 80% of your happiness? So you probably have a lot of friends, but 20% of your friends will be the most important to you. So prioritize those friends, I think is a good tip. What is the 20% of food that you eat 80% of the time? So I guess there's a few things you could think about with this one, but I imagine for most people, we all have these meals that we either order or make most of the time. There are so many meals that we know how to make or how to order if you're not a good cook, but we usually end up going back to the same things again and again. There's obviously some variety. We're not having the same thing every day for every meal, but I think it's probably a small percentage, like 20% of what we can actually make. So I think a good tip in terms of health would be focus on that 20%, what you always make, and get really, really good at making them. How can you make that 20% delicious, but also really healthy? Is there anything you can add to it or remove to that recipe to make it really healthy? So rather than trying to cook a new recipe every single day and burning out like that, you can think about what you can do to improve the recipes you're already making. I love that tip. I think I try to do that as well. Keep it simple, but keep it healthy. I think I will leave it there. My brain is slowly turning off. I've used up most of the energy I've had. Maybe I've used up 20% of my energy trying to make 80% of this episode. Does that work? I don't know. I'm trying to think of a joke to finish with, but it's not really coming to me. But anyway, I think I will say a quick thank you to a few people on Apple Podcasts. I mentioned a few weeks ago that I hadn't had any reviews in a while, and I was waiting for you. And as soon as I mentioned it, I got so many reviews. So thank you so much for listening and responding to that. I will read all of them, but I have to catch up now. But keep them coming. I love to see them, and it really makes a difference to the podcast as well. So first of all, we have Aghadir from Saudi Arabia. Hi, Michael. I'm Aghadir. I listen to your podcast for 5 months, and I'm in episode 221. Your podcast really helps me, and I like the topics you choose. Keep going with the great work. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Hope I pronounced your name kind of okay. Aghadir, maybe. We have another one from Soho, who says, it's funny one. Thanks for all of your great content. When I first got to this channel, I thought you are Jack of to Fluency. Your voice is so similar to him. I think you already know about him. You are the kind of teacher that I love listening to their side of the story more than the main lesson. That's what makes me interested in learning more than just focusing on the program they set up. Thank you again. That's so kind of you. Thank you. I know about Jack to Fluency, Jack from to Fluency. To my ear, he doesn't sound like me at all. Where is he from? I think this is just from memory. I'm not too familiar, but I think Jack is from the north of England somewhere. When I'm imagining his accent, it sounds a bit northern in my head. And my accent is a bit of a confusing one. I'm from the southwest, but my accent is not super typical of the southwest. But that's interesting. Maybe other people can let me know if I sound like Jack. But anyway, thank you very much. That was from Vietnam. So thank you, En Soho. One more here from Muhammad Omara, who says, Hello, Michael. This is Mohammed from Tripoli, Libya. I would like to thank you for your show. I enjoyed listening to you every morning in my car. My listening skills have improved a lot, referring to your shows about acronyms. I remember there was an acronym widely used to make friends in chat and texting, which is ASL. It stands for age, sex, location. Finally, in your experience, what's the best method to improve speaking skills by myself? Well, thank you very much, Mohammed. You are right. That was very common when I was growing up. ASL. When you meet someone new, you type in ASL, like, what's your age? Are you male or female? And where are you? But I feel like it's quite often used in like a dating sense, like to meet a boyfriend or girlfriend. So in my head, it has like a creepy connotation, a creepy feeling to it. But I guess it depends how you use it. And as for your question about improving speaking by yourself, I think I spoke about this more in a previous episode. If you go to episode 102 of the podcast, I speak about improving your speaking skills, and I also speak about improving them on your own as well. One tip that it sounds really simple, but it really can help is just speaking to yourself or recording yourself. Like go around, maybe spend 30 minutes or something and just say out loud everything that you're doing. You know, that could be a really nice way to practice. And it seems like it doesn't help, but it really can. But yeah, listen to that episode 102 for more advice on speaking. Thank you to the reviews. Really appreciate all of you. That's very kind of you. Let's just go to a quote now from the book called The 80-20 Principle, The Secret to Achieving More with Less by Richard Koch, I guess. And he said in the book, things that matter most must never be at the mercy of things that matter least. In other words, don't let the things that don't matter get in the way of the things that do matter. I haven't read this book, but I imagine if you're interested in this topic, it's a really good book to read and learn more. So once again, that's The 80-20 Principle, The Secret to Achieving More with Less. Haven't read it, but maybe you'd like to check it out. Thank you anyway for listening or watching. Really appreciate your time. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, everyone. You have been listening to the Level Up English podcast. If you would like to leave a question to be answered on a future episode, then please go to levelupenglish.school/podcast. That's levelupenglish.school/podcast. And I'll answer your question on a future episode. Thanks for listening.